Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. Last year, tonight's guest became the first Republican woman elected to office in the Bronx. Kirsty Marmorato is a council member in the 13th City Council District, which includes the Bronx neighborhoods of, you can list them, Throgs Neck, City Island, she knows them, Pelham Parkway, Morris Park, Pelham Bay, Pelham Gardens, Schuylerville Country Club, Locust Point, Westchester Square. Also parts of Allerton and Van Ness. She'll talk with us tonight about the surge of Republican voting in the Bronx, how she sees the Trump presidency, her first year in office that saw funding coming into the district, her input into the Metro North plan and how it will impact housing and a range of other issues. Let's get to it. Please join me in welcoming the freshman council member from the Bronx's 13th Council District. It is Kirsty Marmorato. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me and Happy New Year.
I just want to put up some numbers before we start, just to give us a jumping off point. You can see there the voting in 2016, the Biden-Harris team got 64.25%, and in the presidential election 8 years later, they only got 55%, and there was a jump for Republican voting for the presidential team from 34.26 to 43.31. How do you account for this surge, for this kind of new image of Republicans in the Bronx, and the fact that you became the first elected Republican in 20 years?
Well, to be honest with you, the Republican Party is now the working class party. Our community has really come out, voiced their opinions. They have come out to the voting polls. They're tired of what's been happening. They feel like they're struggling here in the city, and they wanted to go out and vote accordingly.
What issues do you think they focused on in the election? We're going to talk about other things with your district, but let's just start with that. What issues do you think were important that turned clearly, you can fight the numbers all you want, but the numbers are the numbers, that clearly turned largely Democratic voters into voting for a Republican president?
Kitchen table politics, you know, people are struggling to put groceries in their cabinets and on their table. They're worried about quality of life, such as public safety and education for their children. They really want to push for like a school choice. We need to focus on the working class. We need to focus on the people who are really giving back to the community.
How do you think Donald Trump, now let's tell people we're recording this on Thursday, on Monday, that's the 16th, on the 20th, obviously Donald Trump will be the president of the United States. So when this airs, he will already be the president. How much do you endorse everything that he says? I mean, I don't want to go through every point because we could, but are there issues that you think he will do well on, and do you have some concerns about what might happen in the district?
I support the economy. I think that's one thing we need to combat. You know, when the last day he was in office, it's the cheapest gas prices that we have seen in almost 30 years, and I hope that we can start bringing something like that back. I hope that we can lower our gas prices, you know.
Although the gas prices did drop, I mean,
a little bit. They always drop before an election, though.
Well, that could be. I saw it somewhere $2.97 in the Bronx, which was a revelation. And so, how do you? I don't want to say divorce yourself or separate yourself from the things that you hear. I mean, I could call out all kinds of things. I know that you had said that when you debated here that you don't support insurrectionists. You think that people who break the law should go to jail. Has some of that modified now, or you feel very strongly about it?
No, I feel the same. If you're going to break the law, you should be in jail. You know, there's no reason to rush inside of a Capitol. At that time, these insurrectionists, I don't support that.
Mm-hmm. And so when you hear Donald Trump saying he's going to pardon them, do you cringe? I don't know how else to say it, or you think maybe this
we'll see how it plays out. You know, I can't speak for him. We don't know how he's going to play it, and we'll see in the coming months, right?
All right, because Monday night there won't be enough. Although he said the first day we'll do this, that, and the other. I want to show you this video. I told you I had a little surprise for you. We're going to go back now to August 14th, 2000. The last elected Republican was Guy Villela. He, of course, was on our show several times. I pulled out a clip that I think is particularly relevant to the next part of our discussion. So let's go back. Bronx Talk, this program in this room, he was sitting where she's sitting, former State Senator Guy Villella.
One of my opponents keeps making this distinction. This is a Democratic district and we ought to have a Democrat. And I really reject that idea that you lead people and you represent people by dividing them by names and calling each other who's a Republican, who's a Democrat.
There we go. We pulled out that little clip because I thought it was something you would find interesting. That it's the same, I'm assuming, the same or similar dialogue that you have in your district as representing your district. You want to comment on it? Any thoughts about it?
I represent everybody. It's like having children. You have children who are all can be similar and yet different and have different viewpoints and different thoughts on things, and you have to be able to take care of them and treat them all fairly.
Is it a challenge to know that it's been heavily Democratic and you're coming from maybe a different point of view?
To be quite honest with you, even though they do have different letters at the end of their names, I feel like
the D or the R, or C or L or whatever. Yeah.
I still feel like they all have the same common wants and goals for the district and the community. You got to understand something. They moved to a district because they have similar wants and they're longing for certain things. They want home ownership, they want the public safety, they want the better schools. That's why they've gone to District 13.
You told me, I just asked you, folks, here's a little insight. I asked you beforehand, how's it been? And you said you love it. Why do you love it, and how has this first year been for you?
It's my favorite job that I've ever had.
Although you worked in healthcare, I mean,
and it's been an important job.
And
my 24-year career in healthcare was very rewarding and fulfilling. And I love to take care of people. I love to be in tune with people. I want to help them, their wants, their needs. And I feel like that helped me transition into this role. I'm able to connect to my constituents on a level that I don't know if any people could do. You know, I want to be able to be there and do everything I possibly can to make this district the best it's ever been.
Can you give it, I hadn't thought about this, but since you mentioned it, give us an example of somebody you connected with and then you and your office were able to help solve a problem or address a need or something like that.
Well,
and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm assuming there are many in the.
We have a ton of issues. We had a constituent who is hearing impaired, and he has had a problem with the front of his home, where his fire hydrant has been like basically caving in due to a leak, and then he has no curb cuts on, which is making more water pool up in front of his home, and he has some challenges, and we were able to speak with him through an interpreter, and I've spoken with him personally on a few occasions, and it's frustrating because of the language barrier, I'm sure, for him and him trying to express himself. But we got in the car, drove over there, got in touch with the proper agencies. We were able to repair the hole on his sidewalk.
I was waiting to hear the punchline there that you got it done.
We got it done, and then we're just waiting on the curb cuts. That's the only challenge in this district is to get curb cuts.
I think one of the conversations, whether it was with Guy Villella or others, that there's no political party way of filling a pothole in the street, and this is an example. So you really, and I'm sure for you that must have been rewarding, because
it is rewarding.
It was just like helping somebody in a hospital.
Absolutely.
Let's just get right to it. You brought your staff told me you brought in $10 million of capital funding to the district. Let's talk about the process. Did you learn something about the process? Was it an easy process? I hate to keep going back to it. Does your political party play in that, so it's harder to get it? Or just lay it out for us. I don't want to make any assumptions.
Well, I'm sure being a Republican in a Democratic City Council does play a part in it. I think that the speaker was very fair to me with partnering with me to provide capital funding to the City Island Library. We were able to accommodate $4 million for the upgrades.
But before you move on, what were those upgrades for? I think people would want to know.
It's a roof and I think an air conditioning system.
And you know, it's funny because that doesn't sound like educational, but you can't have a library if that roof is leaking, especially in this day and age.
And in the summer. You know, that's a place where the kids go in the summer just to either grab a book or if there's any kind of programming in the library, and it gets a little warm. It's not a big building.
So that was one example. You can list some more if you'd like.
We were able to fund the FDNY. We were able to get like a robotic dog for them. Anytime there's a building collapse, this dog goes in and is able to.
Wow. And they didn't have that before?
I think they had one before, but they asked for another, especially after that big collapse in Lower Manhattan in that parking structure. So
and there was actually a big fire in Allerton just the other day, I'm
unfortunately.
sure. I haven't been directly in touch with it. Do you know what happened? I heard it was an electrical fire or something.
I'm not really sure what the cause of it was, but they were saying that the wind had a lot to do with it, which is unfortunate. A lot of families got displaced.
Pre-K seats, you got that for City Island? Let's talk about that.
Yes, that was one of the most important things for me. When I went to go speak in City Island during my campaign, I started to do my research, and I just looked at it as a mom. I was like, oh, I wonder what the schools are like out there, how many different options there are, and I realized that there was no pre-K. And
no pre-K on
no
City
pre-K
Island?
on City Island, no.
I'm sorry. And again, we're not talking political parties here. That, for me as a Bronxite, that's just not acceptable.
It's not acceptable.
Absolutely.
So I went out and I started talking to parents, and they were saying how, God forbid, an emergency, and your mom kicks in, you know, you're being a parent kicks in, and it's like, what happens if there's an emergency? You got to worry about getting off of the island, traveling through Pelham Parkway to get to whatever school that your child is at. It's frightening.
And then the worst thing is that a child doesn't get that opportunity, and of course for their growth and for their health,
and also,
all of the above.
If you think about it, if you have multiple children, you got to go bring your child off of the island for pre-K, then to come back to bring your child to school on the island.
So what do they have now?
And I called everybody and anybody that would listen to me from the day I got into
I would have
office.
listened.
You would have listened, but we had to make sure that it happened. And
yeah, that's not my job.
We were able to get 18 seats for PS 175.
Wow. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's great. One of the things I think you've gotten the most citywide visibility on is the Metro North project, which was moving along from the beginning, and even when you did the debate here, you were very concerned about it. But talk a little bit about what was presented and how you helped reform it to a point where you gave it a check mark.
So I'm not anti-development, and that's the first thing that people peg me as, like, oh, because of my stance on the Bruckner rezoning. My stance was more of a logical standpoint of somebody who's lived in the community and why it wouldn't work. I live probably right down the block from where this Metro North rezoning is taking place, and I shop over there all the time. I'm in and out of the blocks over in Morris Park, and it was important to me to protect the low-density portion of the community. And if we were going to develop, we were going to develop smartly. There had to be the finances in place to support the infrastructure to build. So with the apartments that we're going to get, we have about $170 million just in sewer and catch basin infrastructure just along the portion of Bassett Avenue and Stillwell.
That's actually very important, because in many places, I'm well aware, in many places, even in my own neighborhood, they're putting up buildings and that is not taken into account. And we know we have sewage backups already. So that was funding to make sure that while the development happened, it's done right.
Yes, absolutely.
So
that was very important to me. Across the street from where the Morris Park train station is our 49th precinct.
Right.
Their building is suffering, so we were able to acquire $10 million just for upgrades because their roofs are leaking, their windows are leaking, some of the setup inside, they need some upgrades, so we were able to secure that for them.
And with the greater number of people getting off the train and all that, they of course need to be on point to make sure everybody stays safe.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So those were some of the changes that you...
So as far as the zoning changes are concerned, I made sure that any small density portion of the community was not infringed on. So there was one area they wanted to put a 12-story building. The surrounding buildings were ranch level homes. I said, you cannot do this. So right now, currently, if they wanted to build or redevelop that property, it can only go up to 3 stories, which is not overwhelming. A big portion of Eastchester Road, we're struggling over there already with traffic and congestion. You're not going to be able to put 21-story buildings all along the U-shape of Eastchester Road. It just is not possible. We can't handle that.
That's a pretty good-sized building.
It's huge. They're huge. And it was the whole stretch from from Pelham Parkway all the way down to Stillwell.
And so what's it going to be?
It's going to remain the same. So, but in the back of Stillwell, if they're going to put, I think they can do up to 18-story buildings, but we already have about a 20-story building in the back over there.
So it's in
And
context.
Yes, and it's not around any low portion density of our community.
So you were through kind of because of your position as a council member in that district, you were able to navigate it and I guess give city planning credit because they listened.
Yes, they did.
During the debate, I had asked you about affordable housing, and you were like, well, I don't really know where we could build it. How do you feel about your district has the lowest number of affordable units in the Bronx. Is there a place, or other than this Metro North, or do you see that as a good way to start the ball rolling?
Well, a portion of it will be affordable housing with the Bronx Metro North. I really am trying to push for home ownership. With the rezoning of the Metro North, we got well over 500 apartments of home ownership. To me, that is more important. I want to create generational wealth for my community. I want them to be able to start buying. Our only opportunity right now in our district are homes, houses. And, nobody wants to buy a house right away or 20, 25 years old, that's a big responsibility. So if we could get apartments as home ownership, you have to leave my district in order to really buy anything. So to be able to bring that here to District 13 is big.
Creates stability.
Yes.
You had, there was the brokers bill, and you had voted against the brokers bill. It's called the Fairness Apartment Rentals Act, prohibiting landlords from passing broker fees on to tenants. Why did you think that was not the right idea for the Bronx and the city?
Because I feel like the price is just going to go into the now rental. I think the rents are going to go up because of that, because we're no longer going to have that fee being paid by the landlord or the person pursuing the apartment. I think they're going to incorporate that into the rents.
Into the rent,
yes,
and make the consumer pay for it
yes,
ultimately.
Of course.
Talking about costs, you were not a fan of congestion pricing. Obviously, it's too early to judge the whole project.
Yes.
Anecdotal reports people are saying, well, the traffic is a little lighter in Manhattan, which is a good start. What are your thoughts about it at this point?
Of course the traffic's lighter. It's freezing outside. Nobody wants to travel into Manhattan if they don't have to.
It's all anecdotal.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see once the weather starts to get a little bit warmer if that's real.
If the money, and this is, of course, a big question about the way government works or doesn't work. If the money does go to mass transit and they are able to give people a legitimate alternative, a safe alternative, would that make it worth it?
That money's not going towards that. The money's going towards capital projects. It's not going into operational cost or operation.
Mm-hmm.
So
we'll obviously we'll wait and see. Another thing I wanted to ask you about with the new president talking about drill. It'd be hard to really deny climate change, especially for parts of the district that are right on the shorelines. Are you concerned about the coastlines at this particular time, especially City Island? You just get a rainy day and it starts to flood. People aren't coming to have dinner if it's flooded.
Well, it's really taken place, and I do feel, and I can speak for my parents. My parents live in Country Club by the water, and when they first bought the home in the early 2000s, there was no flooding. They built a couple of hundred apartments in the back, condos, 3 separate condo complexes. And my parents say ever since that came about is when the flooding really started taking place. It was the overuse of the infrastructure.
I was going to say that's a development project.
Yes.
We were just talking about that a moment
all
ago.
along the shorelines, like even in Locust Point, they flood really badly. But you know what? If you think about 20, 30 years ago, maybe even 40 years ago, there were probably not as many houses on the blocks as they had.
So what do we do now? I mean, are we just wait and see? Is there going to have to be infrastructure money to do some rebuilding? I mean, I'm not an engineering expert, but stuff has to be done, whether it's walls or whatever.
Absolutely. We need the money for the infrastructure. We need to figure this out somehow, whether it's the city or we get like some kind of federal relief. It's important.
Do you think? Do you have a sense if that will dry up over the next administration, or we'll wait and see? I guess.
As far as the financial end of it,
to find the funding.
Yeah,
for it.
I don't know.
Another concern, because it is the borough of the Bronx. We have immigrants. They're migrants now. I was surprised to hear that they had closed migrant shelters all over the city, but oh, by the way, they were very comfortable announcing that we're opening a migrant shelter on Bruckner Boulevard, not in your district.
No.
For you, we would have heard you talk about it, I'm sure. But what are your thoughts about the new immigration policy that's coming? Schools, excuse me, one more thing. Schools are starting to protect the schools to make sure that ICE agents aren't allowed in and all those kinds of things.
Well, as far as putting a 2,000-bed single men migrant shelter in the Bronx, I think it's absolutely absurd. If anybody could think that a 2,000-bed any kind of facility, I don't care if you're putting 2,000 rock stars in the facility, it's not.
That might not be so great either.
No, but you know what I'm saying. It doesn't matter who you're putting together. If you're making such a big development, it's never going to be a good turnout. That's just too massive and too big to put in one location.
Are you concerned that families who currently live in the district, maybe there is a parent or somebody else who got here illegally, might end up being deported? Is that a concern right now, or are you, let's wait and see how the
No, that's not a concern.
develops?
From my understanding, the only people that will be deported once the new administration comes is people that break the law. And if you break the law, you don't have the right to be here. You know, you got to respect our laws, respect our city, respect our people in our community.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense. We'll see how it plays. I guess the president talks tough, and it's hard to measure what will actually trickle down. Another thing I want to ask you about, because you have been dead set against the casino over there at the golf course that Bally's now runs. Let's just talk about that. Still against it?
Well, I'm in the gathering phase.
I think that, I was going to, but by the way, I was going to ask you, in the year, did, some ideas change because you saw how things were going?
No, my ideas have not changed. I'm going to do what my community wants me to do at the end of the day.
That's fair.
And my only request to Bally's is outreach to the people who are directly impacted by this. I don't care if you're from Arthur Avenue. I don't care if you're from the west side of the Bronx. If you don't outreach to the people who live in this community, in the district where it's going to impact them, I don't want to know about it.
The whole question, I guess, is you had talked about you didn't want to see if there's so much traffic coming in.
Traffic is a major concern.
And that would be a big concern for you.
Yep.
We'll wait and see. We still don't know if they're going to get the license.
No, we don't know. I think that comes over the summer. They need to alienate parkland before they put the application in. But traffic is a major concern. Even in the summer, we were getting so many phone calls and emails and texts to our office about when there's traffic going over the Whitestone Bridge, people cut right down Lafayette Avenue to go over to the Throgs Neck.
Correct.
People living in Locust Point cannot get to their homes. People who live down in Throgs Neck, it's just bumper to bumper traffic all along Schurz Avenue. And that's before a casino even comes. This is just a Friday night traffic jam.
I went to an event at Ferry Point Park on a weekend, and actually, no, I think we were going to take the ferry from Ferry Point Park. And we moved in, there's a rather large parking lot, and I had been there many times and just assumed I could put my car there, but all of a sudden it was backed up. There was like no spaces. We had to sit and wait. That's the kind of infrastructure they'd need to put in if you're going to attract all those people, yes. I presume.
Yes, and what do people do when they go to casinos?
Well, we know that
they drive.
They drive, of course. Just a general question, because small businesses, we can talk about the big projects and all that, but small businesses are really what fuel the economy of the Bronx, people who own stores and everything else. Look, and your district, of course, has so many neighborhoods where there are small businesses. You think of Pelham Parkway and Allerton Avenue. I mean, you can go on at Morris Park Avenue. How do we keep them healthy and stimulate small businesses? What do you hear from them that are there problems, and what would you do to help them do better?
Well, this week we actually went with the Bronx Chamber of Commerce to walk through Van Ness, which is now considered Little Yemen. They are one of the biggest small mom and pop shops of small businesses opening up. I feel like there's
I haven't been there. Now you've sold me. I'm going down.
There's no vacant storefronts, and if there is a possibility of one, they have people lined up ready to take the store over.
So what do you do to keep all of the districts healthy? Like what in general are the kinds
Well,
of
like I said, we
issues?
started with the Bronx Chamber of Commerce. We did a walkthrough there. There are some other communities that we're going to start to go through. I'd like to see some changes in Crosby Avenue and Bure, Middletown Road. I feel like they really can, not the businesses are doing great, but just to clean up the streets a little bit over in that area would be
We're almost out of time. It's going to be a new legislative year. What do you hear that you like? What do you hear that you're concerned about for the coming session and the coming year?
Well, we need to start cracking down on these e-bikes and e-scooters. They are a nuisance in our community. They've been a real public safety issue, and I want to help with any kind of legislation to really crack down on that.
Do you like the idea of licensing required?
I think we should have licensing because it's like the Wild West. They're riding all over the sidewalks illegally, and there's no accountability.
You know, I mean, like all of us walking down the sidewalk and all of a sudden somebody zips by, it would be helpful if you could at least get a license plate number,
Yep.
but they go and they're just like anybody walking in the street. Anything else you want to add? Something that I didn't ask you about? I mean, there's plenty of things to ask about.
There's so much.
You know, I got one thing on my mind, which we also talked about in the debate, was the ferry stop on City Island. You like the idea of moving it to Orchard Beach.
I think that there's plenty of parking in Orchard Beach. I feel like there's no need right now for an additional ferry stop in the Bronx.
We had a very now we're going to run out of time because now I want to talk. You and I had a just brief interchange during the debate because I believe that City Island needs a bus service anyway.
Yes.
And go back and forth from Orchard Beach. It just makes sense. The businesses can advertise. All right, they're telling me I got to go. That was Gary's editorial opinion. Thank you so much, Kirsty Marmorato.
you.
Good luck in 2025.
Absolutely.
And we hope to have you back sometime again.
Thank you.
Folks, we thank our producer, Rebecca Hemick. The director is Will Guzman. Urelis Encarnacion is on graphics. Ian Neville is with us on audio. Editor is Yenelsida Diaz. Cast of thousands here in the studio. We thank the council member for joining us. And of course, mostly you two, people of the Bronx. And so if the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, I'll be back next week.